Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. I'm Kevin Bille, and as always, we appreciate you joining us today. I'm really looking forward to today. We have Dr. Nicole Detling. She is a mental performance coach. She's a speaker and an author as well. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. It's so awesome to be here.
I should have actually, man, I left it out. You're kind of do it all. I should have mentioned how you also hooked me up with a ride when it was raining in Florida. So I should have mentioned that too as part of your title. But very, very intrigued to talk with you today and just knowing a little bit of your story when we were together down there and staying in touch. And mental toughness, as I've said on here a couple of times with some previous guests, it's just something that I have a great deal of interest in as we were talking about our injuries off air. But let's just start right away. Like, how does one work on this, Nicole? Like, can you give us a couple ways to do that?
Just the idea of mental toughness. Yeah. So, it's interesting. I kind of have to backtrack a little bit and give you how I feel about mental toughness. I've been working with athletes for 23 years now. I've worked with I've worked with pro athletes in every major sport. I've been to multiple Olympic Games as part of Team USA. I've worked with University of Utah athletic team, all of their athletic teams in their athletic department. I work with ballet dancers all the way down through high school kids and junior high kids. And I get asked that question a lot, like, help me build my mental toughness. And a lot of times people will come in with something specific that they're looking for, but many times it's just, I want to be more mentally tough, right? And so when someone comes in and just says, I want to be more mentally tough, what we talk about then are all of the factors that go into mental toughness. So the way I see mental toughness is kind of an umbrella term. And there's a lot of factors that go into becoming mentally tough. There's not like one way to build mental toughness. So, for your listeners, one of the things I'd recommend is looking at your performance, however you perform, wherever you perform, and just saying, okay, where could I be a little better? Where could I be a little stronger? What are those elements that I might be missing or lacking? And then I would come in and fill in the gap. So, my 30-second elevator pitch is, I'm the how. A lot of people know that they should relax or they should focus during performance, but how? What does that mean? Relax. Should I lay down and take a nap on the soccer field, coach? Is that what you're looking for? Like, what do you mean? Like, I know the concept of relax, but I don't know how. I know the concept of focus, but is it this? Am I doing it, coach? Is this what you wanted? Right? Like, how? What does it mean in my sport and what I'm doing in my performance? And so I come in and I'm the how. So when we talk about building mental toughness, a piece of it is, it's everything from building confidence to concentration, composure, letting go of mistakes, playing the game one play at a time, managing the fear, the doubt, the anxiety, like all of those emotions that come into play. So, honestly, back to your original question, can you give us a couple ways? I could give you thousands of ways.
Yeah.
Right? We're just looking at what element of mental toughness are you specifically wanting to work on? But I will go back and answer your question a little better than that, in that if someone comes to me and says, I don't really know, I just want to be more mentally tough, what I'll go to are the 5 cardinal skills of mental toughness. And that's outlined in my book that I co-authored with Dr. Keith Henshin called Don't Leave Your Mind Behind. But basically the 5 cardinal skills, number 1, in the book, it's actually called pre-performance anxiety, but I like to term it more now of emotional adaptability. And so the idea behind that is you can't control your performance until you first learn to control yourself. And emotions are an inherent part of any performance. They're an inherent part of life. It's something we will all experience. And it's not about lacking emotion or getting to zero emotion, but it's about understanding and working with your emotions and being able to adapt and adjust based on those emotions you're feeling in the game in that moment. So that's got to be number 1. That's always number 1. If you don't have that emotional adaptability, emotional control, however you want to look at it, you're not going to perform that well when it comes game time and there's pressure and, things are on the line and they matter. Number 2, so that's always number 1. Honestly, 2, 3, and 4 they can be interchangeable, but it's focus and concentration, which is basically just keeping your mind in the right place, where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be there, and being able to adjust and adapt that accordingly. So if you go from one play to the next and your mind is focused here, then you got to focus it in the next place, right? So keeping your mind where it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be there. Then we have imagery. Some people call it visualization. Use whatever term you want, but using your mind and doing the mental reps of your performance. Self-talk. self-talk being in a productive way. And I probably talk about positive and negative self-talk a little bit different than a lot of people in my field, but it's just years of experience and what I found kind of works. Excuse me. And then the last one is pre-performance routines. So you're warmed up, but are you ready to go? So it's not just physically getting your body ready, but making sure your mind is ready when it's game time as well. So those would be like the 5 cardinal skills that if someone comes in and just says, hey, I just want to be more mentally tough, I don't really have anything in particular I want to work on, that's what I would work on with them. And I do want to give you one more piece of that, because a lot of people will say, well, what about confidence? Why isn't confidence part of that? And the reason why confidence isn't one of those 5 cardinal skills is because all 5 of those skills will also build your confidence. Confidence is, if you learn to have more emotional adaptability and flexibility and you're under better emotional control, you're going to feel more confident. If you learn to keep your mind in the right place at the right time and know how to get it to that place, you're going to feel more confident. Right. So, learning all of those other skills builds confidence as well. So confidence is kind of like an inherent backdooring into confidence on all of those.
Well, and I think, and that's, man, this is really good right off the bat. I think the confidence thing, just to piggyback off that, Nicole, as a former athlete and coach, it's crazy when you have a lot of it, and it's crazy when you have none of it. But like you said, all those things are contributing to it. I'd be anxious to know, because like leadership, I hear, hey, were they born as a leader, or were they, did they become a leader? And I guess my mind's going towards that right now with mental toughness, because I got to think you have these breakthrough moments, which would probably lead to the fact that you can at some point become better with mental toughness. But do you think it's a little bit of both? I'd be interested in hearing, are some people, is this just something that, because it's hard for me to remember back when this all started. I'm sure it's been through a lot of experiences, but it's how I just relate everything to that now because of those experiences. So where do you stand on that in terms of born with it, or is it, consistently molded and grown over time?
I believe it's consistently molded and grown over time. The born with it idea, I wouldn't say we're born with it, but I would say that we have developed a level of mental toughness throughout our upbringing as kids. What were our experiences as kids? What was our family dynamic? How, what the coaches that we had growing up, the teachers that we had, our life experiences have influenced that most of the time, not deliberately. So we do have a level of foundation that we will start with when we get into, when we start to become more aware of it, we will have that level that we've started with. But I think it comes more from our upbringing and the things that we've experienced in life. But, honestly, if you can't learn it, then none of us mental performance coaches have a job, right? Yeah. Clearly, you can learn to be more mentally tough. And the research shows that, anything that changes over time, implies that it can be learned. And mental toughness is one of those factors that changes over time, which means you can learn to be more mentally tough.
Yeah, well, it is. It's so intriguing to me now when I've gotten to know you and a couple others in that field. I'll spend 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes, I've answered all the questions that maybe I needed to know because of it's crazy to me. I would be interested to know, just in general with clients or in this field, like how many of them struggle with who they are versus what they do?
Oh my gosh. It would be hard to think of an example of someone who doesn't. I want to say 100%, but I'm sure there's a few who figured it out. So it's going to be a pretty high number. And I think that's not even just true within athletics. We all, so, you go to a party or you go and you meet someone and you say, hey, my name is so-and-so, and you get to learn about the other person. What's the first thing people always say? Hey, tell me about yourself. What do they always say first? What they do. Nobody tells you who they are. They tell you what they do.
It's good.
And so I think that we all kind of struggle with that to a degree. And that's actually something that I'm pretty cognizant of. And I work pretty hard with the people that I work with is tell me about you outside of your sport or outside of your job or outside of, right? Who are you? What are those values that you have, those core values of who you are? And how does that show up in your world? Because I think that we are somewhat what we do, but that is just a small piece of us. We're also human beings who have relationships, and we're spouses, parents, children, siblings, we are neighbors, we are friends, and what do all of those roles look like? But even that is still that might be a layer down into who you are, but then who
Hmm.
you are at your very core are those values and those traits that you associate yourself with. A lot of times I will do, if someone's really searching for that, we'll go through this process of what I call the 5 characteristics of me. And, I give them some questions to ask, and they go and they think about it and they spend some time, and they have to come back with 5 words that describe who they are and give me an explanation of each of those 5 words. And those lead to really interesting conversations, and it helps people separate some of their who they are from what they do, so that when they fail at what they do, because we're all going to fail at one point or another, they don't bottom out. They don't hit that rock bottom. They're able to say, I failed at this thing, but I am not a failure. I still have these 5 characteristics, these 5 qualities about me that make me who I am, regardless of that performance I just did. I can be disappointed with that performance, but that's not who I am.
Man, I love that. I love that. And as you were talking, my mind just shifted to I just started thinking of relationships, and it doesn't matter to me what they do. I'm with my wife because of who she is, my best friends or whoever they are because who they are. And,
Right.
and, I guess the 5 word things, you should probably get validation from a spouse or something to make sure those words are accurate from now on. But,
Yeah,
um,
maybe.
I,
Yeah.
what's that?
I said maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah, we see ourselves in a different way than other people see us
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know, like, what's the variance from client to client then when we talk about these things, and maybe even some of the similarities that are out there? Because I think you're bringing up some interesting things already. I know we started maybe in the world of athletics, but it could be in the world of business right now as a leader. I'm sure there's a ton of things that are similar as well. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would actually say there's a lot more similarities than there are differences, because at a very basic level, we're all human beings, and
Yep.
we're all just out there doing the best we can. And we make good decisions, we make bad decisions. Sometimes we perform at our highest level, and sometimes we fail. I mean, that's the reality of life, regardless of what that performance is. So, to be honest with you, I mean, if I look at just my day yesterday, I did a 4 hour workshop for a federal government agency on resiliency, and I spent 4 hours with them. And then right after that, I met with a professional soccer player. Right after that, I had 10 and 12-year-old sisters who play tennis. Right after that, I had a 15-year-old soccer player. And so the dynamics of that would sound like, wow, you had a really different day. Like, you're bouncing from one to the other. And how do you
Yeah.
maintain that? But the reality is, I look at everybody as, how can I get you from where you are to where you want to be? And everybody else wants that as well. That's everyone's goal, right? Here's where I am and here's where I want to be. How do I fill that gap? How do I get there? And it's not very different. It's so much more similar. However, what's different is that, let's say if we're working on confidence, and even those 10 and 12-year-old sisters, right? They're sisters. They live in the same house. They have the same
Hmm.
parents. They play the same sports. They're very similar in age, but the pathway to get there is very different for those 2 girls. So what's different is how you get to where you want to go to, even though it might be labeled the same thing, like confidence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense, and it's crazy to me because it's like you just alluded to it. It's like they could be playing the same things, but you're bouncing around from government to 10-year-old to professional soccer player. That's kind of mind boggling in essence, because it's all over the board.
Mhm.
But yet I love where you're going with that, and what your approach is. I was going to get to this later, and people have heard me on here numerous times, so I'm beating a dead horse, but obviously, faith and family, those are high priorities in our house. But my boys probably hear something about resiliency every day. When we were texting about that a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh my gosh, Nicole, whenever that class is, I got to get in on it. I don't really have anything specific to ask you about, but when I hear that word, it kind of fires me up. Just speak a little bit to it though. And why is it so? I guess my question would be, it's just, to me, why is it so important in life? Because I think it is a huge factor in people that are successful and are not.
Yeah, totally. So I'll kind of give the listeners here a little bit of background. So I've been teaching resiliency workshops to federal government agencies since 2013, I think. So 7, 8 years now. A number of different federal government. Now, don't think, a lot of people when they hear federal government, they're like, "Oh, you're working with the president." No, 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 it's not where I am. It's federal government agencies. So, for example, just yesterday, I did this with the Federal Railroad Administration. right? So think about any of those agencies. And basically what we're talking about is, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that we all fail. We fail every day, right? And that failure can take us out of the game, whatever the game is. It can really, disable your mind and get you into this really negative space and kind of spiral you downwards. Or you can learn from that and come back from that failure stronger than you were before. And that's really what my resiliency courses are based on, is bouncing, not just bouncing back, which is how a lot of people define resiliency, but flourishing on the other side. How can we learn and grow through our experiences in life so that we can do life a little bit better going forward? And we're all just trying to do life a little bit better. And so these workshops actually started several years ago with a colleague of mine. We had started them together, kind of pitched the idea. They went with it, and they've loved the classes so much that they continue to bring me back and continue to teach these. And it's really based on the idea that resiliency is something that's built automatically through the adversities that we go through if we pay attention. If we pay attention to those adversities and we learn from them, we build resiliency. But the aspect that I come from, or the angle that I come from, is you can also build a fence at the top of the cliff rather than put an ambulance down in the valley. You can build resiliency skills outside of adversity so that when adversity strikes, you're able to handle it better. And when you do things on purpose, with purpose, like build resiliency, you will handle things better when they come. As I talked about several times yesterday in this workshop, and what I say quite a bit is, we've all been through stuff in life. Some of us are going through stuff right now. And the reality is, as long as you're still alive, something else is coming. Sometimes we see it coming, and sometimes it smacks us between the eyes and we had no idea it was coming. Like sometimes it just hits us in the face, hits us in the gut, and we just, right? Something else is coming. And the more prepared, the more we build our resiliency muscle, so to speak, the more we kind of build some of these protective factors that will help us get through the next thing that's coming, the better we can get through it, and the more we can flourish on the other side. So that's what these workshops are all based on. Throughout my own research, I used to be a professor at the University of Utah, and I did some research there on my own, as well as with some colleagues and some students on resiliency. And then this colleague and I now have kept up on a lot of the resiliency literature, and we kind of created our own little program on how to build resiliency through what we call, it's pretty prevalent in the literature. They call it protective factors. And so we've kind of identified the primary 8 that we believe are the primary 8 protective factors to help people build resiliency. And that whole workshop is, goes through all 8, but then how-tos, like how to build each one of them. Here's what you can go do today, tonight, tomorrow. Here's what you can do going forward if this is one of the protective factors that you would like to focus on. The beauty of having 8 different ones is that we're all different, and we're not all going to respond the same way to the same one. And quite frankly, as we go through our life challenges and we go through life, the same one doesn't always work. So having a multitude of tools to go to, if you will, helps you get through the different scenarios and things that happen.
I think I'm done. I got everything I need after that. I mean, that's truly good stuff.
Yeah.
I would want to interject right now with I think I heard you say it initially in Florida, to embrace the suck. We were talking about that a little bit ahead of time, but how would you suggest people do that, and where that also fits in with what we just talked about in resiliency, right? I mean, they got to go hand in hand.
Yeah, they do. They do go hand in hand. And so for anybody who's watching this who knows me, you're going to laugh because you hear me say this all the time. If you've ever worked with me, you've heard me say it. If you were a student in any of my classes, you've heard me say it. But a big thing, I'm really about the quote that I like to use a lot is embrace the suck, which comes from the military, right? Embrace the suck, but don't get stuck in the suck. And the idea behind that is, as I was saying before, like life happens, failure happens. You're going to fail no matter how well prepared you are. It doesn't always go the way you want it to. Sometimes you're not that well prepared and it does go the way you want it to.
Yeah.
But we can't always predict those things in life. And so the idea behind the embrace the suck coming from the military is like, the more that you are in this moment and you just say, this is what it is, the better you can manage it going forward. And what we tend to do as humans is we resist it. So we're in the middle of the suck, whatever you want, whatever it is that sucks in that moment, right? You're in the middle of the suck and you're resisting it and you're fighting it. And I'm overwhelmed and I wish I wasn't here. And man, this sucks and I hate this and I just want to get out of it. And Like we go through those moments, and the more we resist that, the bigger it grows and the more it takes hold of us. And then we just get stuck. We're stuck in the suck, and we're spinning our wheels and trying to get through it by saying, I don't want to be here. But saying, I don't want to be here doesn't get you out of there.
That's right.
Right. And
Right.
so what I'll talk about with people is, like, they'll come in my office and maybe, they're talking about a situation that sucks. And I'm listening to them and I'm getting, helping them through and, kind of validating. It's really a lot about validating and saying, yeah, I can understand how that's frustrating for you, or tell me a little bit more about that. And, really helping them embrace it, just acknowledge it. That acknowledgement is kind of key for embracing the suck. You don't have to like where you are, but the more you just say, this is where I am, I don't have to like it, but this is my current situation, right? That's how I work on helping people embrace the suck. Acknowledge it. Say it sucks. Because you know what? It does. Don't try to pretend it doesn't. It totally sucks. And it's okay that it sucks, right? You don't have to like it, but acknowledge that it does. And then I brought this out. So I have a sucks button. It's kind of like the Staples easy button. So people, if they're in my office in person, like they're kind of, going through their embrace the suck process, and they get to hit this, which.
That sucks. That really sucks. Hey, everyone, come and see how bad this sucks.
There's like 5 different voices.
That's good.
I suck.
You never know what's coming next.
Yeah, right. There you go.
So they'll hit the sucks button, and then, it's kind of like a funny little thing to kind of like transition from, okay, this sucks, right? The next question I'm going to ask is either, what's the opportunity here? Or what are you going to do about it? Or give me one action you're going to take to move forward. I'm asking one of those questions depending on, or a question similar to that, depending on the person, what the situation is. And so basically the steps are, you acknowledge it. You say, I don't really like where I am, but this is where I am, and this sucks. All right. What am I going to do about it? And maybe, that question isn't going to get you out of the suck. But the idea is to take one action, to start moving forward in one way, to do one thing a little bit different that then puts you on the path to getting out of the suck. Maybe it takes a year to get out of the suck for some people. Maybe it takes 6 months. Maybe it takes a week. Maybe it takes a day. Like, it kind of depends on what your level of suck is. But the idea is, if you want to get out of the suck, you got to go through the suck and continue to move forward in some direction, in some way. And what I found for a lot of people is just one small action, one small behavior can put them on the path toward getting out of it so much faster than they ever thought, right? It empowers them versus just getting stuck in the, I don't like this. This is stressful. I wish this wasn't happening. Okay, but it is. So what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. I love that.
Empowerment goes a long way.
So some of those things, I guess, that come to mind, and I'm going to come at it from a sports angle because I think there are some differences here, but whether that's, that could be fear, not letting go of mistakes, dealing with adversity, some of these things you're talking about. I'm probably bigger with my mentality on next play because in basketball, I didn't have time, but if I'm a baseball player, I strike out, I might have to wait an hour before I bat again. If I throw an interception, I might have to wait 15 minutes. If I hit a bad golf shot, it might be 10 minutes. I'm dealing with that right now with our oldest. It's different, I think, when it comes to maybe the sport you're in or whatever you're in right now. But like, what is your insight on that? Is that a different approach because of that sport or that experience then?
It absolutely is. So there's a difference between those sports, like you're saying, that have continuous play, basketball, soccer, swimming, anything that's continuing, like you go until something happens and you have no idea how long that's going to be, versus sports that have a natural break in play. And those sports that have a natural break in play, if you use that time between plays appropriately, you can absolutely, very easily, very simply get your mind into that next play mentality. But if you use it inappropriately, that will destroy you more than anything else. That's one of the reasons why golf, honestly, I've always said, as long as golf is a sport, I have job security for life, because that one will mess with you more than any other. You spend so much more time between shots than you actually do over the ball. There's so much extra time outside of actual playing time in golf. And what you're doing mentally sets you up for what comes next execution wise, right? So a lot of those sports that have a natural break in play And I'll give you kind of like something generic to do, but it does depend on the sport. So you do have to kind of personalize it a little bit for yourself individually, but as well as think about how does it work within this sport. But what I'll do is have athletes come up with basically like a pre-play, like where you get into the play and then execute and then get out of the play. And that's the key, is you get out of the last play, you get out of the last shot, you get out of the last point. And most athletes don't do that, but you have to get out of it, whether it's a good one or a bad one, whether it went well or it went poorly, because continuing to celebrate after a great play and taking that into the next one can mess you up just as bad as being stuck on a bad one. And so you get in, you execute, you get out, get in, execute, get out. And that's basically the routine that we're working on. And most athletes kind of know how they get into a play, but very few can tell me when I ask them the question, well, how do you get out of it? Very few can tell me how to get out of it. So we're going to work specifically for that person in that sport. What is their method for getting out of the last play? And then they're doing this consistently. They're doing it in practices. They're doing it in games. They're doing it all the time to automate that skill, to automate that mental routine so that they are ready for the next play when the next play comes, because the next play is the most important play in any game, right? Yeah. But when you have continuous sports, so, basketball or basketball, soccer, or those sports that just keep going until something stops, a lot of what I'll do is work on an exercise for them that's more of kind of getting their mind in the moment. So this kind of goes to, I know this is like another question that you have for later, but I'm going to bring it in here because this is where it becomes important.
Go right ahead. A
couple of things about the brain that we have to know that come into play here. One is, at any one moment in time, you can only have one thought. You have one thought and one thought only in that forefront conscious part of your brain. So we switch back and forth between thoughts very quickly. But if I take a snapshot of your brain, there's one thought, there's one thought, there's one thought, one at a time. That's all we have. Okay. The second thing to know is that it's called the law, that forefront conscious part of your brain. It's called the law of occupied space, because that space is always occupied with something, always occupied with something. There's always something there. There's never nothing. It's never empty. There's always something, and it's only one thing. Okay. Now I'm using the word thought as kind of a placeholder because it's not necessarily a conscious thought. It might be more of tuned into a feeling within your body. It might be more of an awareness of what's going on around you, but there's something there, and only one, always one, only one. Okay. So when it comes to these continuous sports, the way that you get out of a bad play, most people are going to ruminate on it. They're going to think about it. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. That was so stupid. And then they kind of replay it in their head over and over, and their body is into the next play already. It's on the other side of the court, and they're still thinking about the missed shot or, something like that. So what I'll do is, you can't just stop thinking about the missed shot. The way you stop and you get that thought out is you start thinking something else. You have to put something in there on purpose, with purpose, to get that one out.
So you're replacing it in essence.
Got to replace it, and you got to replace it on purpose. Mm-hmm. And so one of the quickest and easiest things that I'll have athletes do in that sport is get their mind back into that moment. And it can be any continuous sport, doesn't matter which one it is. And I'll have them, I call it just commentate the game. Just in your head, what do you see around you? Number 10 has the ball. They're making a break. Number 13's on them. I'm going to run to this open space. Go, 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 go. Run, 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 run. Put your hand up, just commentate. Just be in that moment and commentate. And what you're doing is filling that space in your brain, which pushes out that negative adversity, what just happened. You can lay awake all night if you want to and think about that, but in the game is not the time. And so get your mind back into the present moment. Get your mind, right? Be where your feet are. Get your mind in this moment. And you can do so just by commentating. Like, what do you see around you? What's going on in the game? And oftentimes you don't have to do that very long before you're back into the game, right? And then maybe, the whistle blows, timeout, ball goes out of bounds, whatever. And your mind might go back to that because it's still trying to reassess and reevaluate what happened. If that's what happens, that's okay. It gives you a little bit of time to get through that, and then bringing yourself back into the game again. Just commentate. What do you see? What's happening? And I use that quite a bit with a lot of athletes in those continuous sports.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. And you're making me a lot smarter today. I know that much. But I find it to be very interesting then on how that impacts other facets of my life now, and just getting to that next play, if you will. And yeah. I know, it's not like I don't play golf, but that's just it's just an interesting thing to me how you have to take a different approach with that. What about, I'd be interested to know where all this comes from and kind of how to stop it. You know, anything dealing with pressure, anxiety, performance, all those type things. I think that's something across the board that we're talking about in life that we all deal with, regardless of the position. I don't care if you're a CEO or where you're at on the supposedly title totem pole, but what do people do when they're faced with those type of things, whether it be it's a deadline, it's a one-time project, maybe it's a daily thing that they're struggling with. What would you suggest there, Nicole?
Yeah, I think part of it's understanding where that pressure is coming from. And the answer is it's always coming from you. That's where it's always coming from. It's your perception
Amazing.
of the situation. It's your perception of what other people are putting on you, what other people's expectations are. It's all within you. All the pressure's coming from you, right? I mean, if we look at athletes, it's, this is the sport you play all the time. Why do you feel under pressure now? Well, because this game's really important. Okay. So it's your perception of the importance of this game and the importance of the outcome that's putting pressure on you. And so when we can recognize that it's us, then we have a lot more control over it, right? Because it's us. And so, what you do about it, there are, oh my gosh, I'm actually on my podcast, I'm in the middle of a series on how to handle pressure. And I think I just finished strategy number 14, right? I mean, there's so many different ways that you can handle pressure, but it's kind of figuring out, what is it to you? What is the outcome? Why are you focused on that outcome that matters? And then how do we bring that back into the process, and focusing on how we do things instead of the outcome of what we're doing. And everybody's going to be a little bit different. Like there's no one right answer, but I think the one thing that holds true for everybody is it's all about how you're thinking of the situation and the potential positive ramifications or negative ramifications, something you want really, really bad to happen and how great that would be, or if it doesn't happen, how miserable that would be and how that might change your life. And a lot of times just kind of talking through that catastrophization of that, right? We catastrophize that negative event. It's like, well, if I don't get this, then it's everything I've ever worked for is flushed down the toilet. And then, oh my gosh, I probably won't be able to play on the team anymore. And then mom and dad are going to kick me out of the house and I'm going to have to live under a bridge, right? Like we don't actually have that conscious thought process, but our subconscious takes it to this extreme level and we catastrophize it versus let's talk through the real life. If this doesn't happen for you, what's the actual outcome? And it's usually you're going to be disappointed. Embrace the suck. Is it going to suck? Heck yeah, it's going to suck. Have you been disappointed before? Probably. Did you get through it? Yeah. Is it going to change your life in ways that are so devastatingly awful that you're not going to be able to overcome it? Probably not. Most likely not. Not if we're talking about a sport, right? And so getting people to kind of understand the actual real consequences of a failure or not getting what they want helps them just kind of put the pressure into a manageable place. And then kind of understanding that the pressure is coming from me and how can I work with the pressure? Again, it's not that you can't just ignore it. You can't pretend it's not there. It's kind of like the suck, like it does suck. Is there pressure? There is pressure, right? Acknowledge that and then manage it and maybe even allow it or learn how to use it for your benefit instead of it being a detrimental thing for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned the word control a couple of times and I was going to touch on this anyhow, but I'm huge on this, and it's probably more the stoicism of Ryan Holiday getting into me more. But how important is this to you? How big of a deal is it that you are focused on what you can control versus what you don't control, and how I think this is more of a struggle than I realize with people.
Yeah, it's an incredibly big deal. I mean, it's one of the keys for success, in my opinion. Absolutely. If you think about it, many times the things that we are stressed about are totally outside of our control. So let's take COVID, for example. How many people were so stressed and so anxious and so nervous and so just freaked out about the pandemic? Yet, what can you personally do about the pandemic? Nothing. So let's take this big thing that we're stressed out about and let's bring it down into what can I do about it? What is in my control? Well, I can wash my hands. I can wear a mask when I go out. I can make sure that, I can sanitize my home. I cannot allow people out into my home. I can, there are ways that we bring this down into things that we can control. And then we still might feel a little bit nervous and anxious, but we're doing what we can do within our circumstances that we have. And that's a big key. I mean, thinking about what stresses people out, what do people get really nervous about winning a game? Well, can you control whether or not you win the game? No, because the other team gets to vote who wins too,
That's
and they're
right.
not voting for you.
Yeah, right.
Right? Right? Individual sport, every athlete is voting for who wins and they're not voting for you. So you can do everything right and not win. So really it's about, a lot of times it's about taking your mind out of the outcome and bringing it into the process. And so a real quick, easy way to do that I'll give athletes is I use what I call the how to the now strategy. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to win. I want you to want to win. You better want to win. If not, what the heck are you doing? Right? So yes, want to win, but winning is out here. It's out of your control. It's out here. So you ask yourself, okay, I want to win. Great. I want to win. Acknowledge it, accept it, and then say, well, how am I going to do that? And then it brings it here. And depending on what sport we're talking about and what athlete, there's an answer to, well, how am I going to do that? Well, I have to beat everybody else. Well, how am I going to beat everybody else? Well, I have to be at my best. How am I going to be at my best? Well, I'm going to make sure that I go through my pre-performance routine. I'm going to think about all the preparation I've done. I'm going to make sure I warm up appropriately. I'm giving you really generic answers. But that right there, that last answer to the question, how, 100% in your control. And when you take ownership of that and you take control of that and you do those things, you can also follow it backwards and say, well, if I do this, then I'm more likely to be at my best. If I'm at my best, I'm more likely to beat the other players. If I beat the other players, I'm more likely to win. So you can connect the dots forward and backwards. So anytime there's something out there, I just say, well, how? How are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? And ask how as many times as you need to until you get to the now. In this moment, right here, what can I control? What can I do? What action can I take? What behavior can I take? What thoughts do I want to think? What puts me in the best position now to get what I'm looking for later? And so I'll walk athletes through that process a few times and help them just kind of get into that space of control what I can now. That will give me a better opportunity, although it's no guarantee. But if I keep my mind here, I do these things here, that's the execution phase, I'm giving myself the best chance.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think it's when you're not in the now, you never have a chance to get to, some of those things, right? You place so much time, effort, energy, whatever, into something else, and it just totally, and it gets you distracted. It gets you, I mean, the opponent then is winning. I mean, the opponent is getting exactly what they want. And I think that's some of the mind games that probably some coaches, players, they probably go with that. I alluded to it earlier, and you just mentioned like asking how, however many times. I think I said it, just it's unique to me how you ask these questions and get, the answers, or me to think those. I think I alluded earlier to 5 minutes, but and as a result, I see it building up self-confidence. So question asking and what you do, it has to be important. And I think it even has to be intentional to that last example, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it is so intentional. It's so important. For me to be successful with the athletes that I'm working with or the clients that I'm working with, I have to ask the right questions. If you don't ask the right questions, you're never going to get the right answers. And many times people don't know the answers. So you have to be a little creative in asking those questions to help them find answers. But it is an art for sure. I've definitely improved at it over the years. And a lot of it, honestly, Kevin, at this point, it's reading body language. It's understanding the answer to the last question and how much that person really believed that, or if they think that might be the answer, and then getting a little bit deeper in one way or another. It's a process of discovery. And that, honestly, it's the fascinating part to me, is discovering each individual and what that person needs to get from where they currently are to where they want to be. And that's my role, is to help them fill that gap. And there's no one size fits all. I don't have a one size fits all program, because I personalize and individualize programs for each person who's sitting in front of me to where I feel is going to best help them get to where they want to go. And then we're partners in that process. We get started down a path and something new happens, or they have different thoughts, or something else popped up they hadn't thought of before, and we got to switch gears. That's what we're going to do, because that's what they need in that moment.
I just think that's something, probably the older I get, and I'm more of a talker and a listener still, but I'm getting better. But I think asking questions in just general, it's such a way to learn and grow, right? I mean, and you said it, like, you have to ask the right questions. What are you, just go a little bit deeper, if you don't mind, to educate some of the listeners, or maybe it's just me, but How do you really, you mentioned body language, some of these other things. Do you at least have in mind maybe some questions that you know work, and you might start with those, you might inject those, but in essence, you're looking for those certain things to get to where you need to get to? Like, how do you get those right questions? Am I making sense in asking that? I mean, it's
You're
tough.
totally making sense, but I wish I could give you a formula, but
Yeah.
honestly, it's listening to the previous
Yeah.
answer. And I think probably if you had asked me this, 15 years ago, 20
Mm,
years ago, when I was first starting my career, I probably had kind of some guided set questions that I would use. I I've long forgotten what those were. Um, I think I've just gotten better over time at the art of just really listening and
yeah.
understanding where that person is and where they want to go, and then just helping them get there. Because, even if we use the same questions, they don't always resonate with everyone in the
This is
same
true.
way. And so I might be trying to get at the same understanding, but there's 15 different ways to ask the question.
Hmm.
And a big piece of it, I guess, is I have to work on asking a question in a way that you are going to hear it correctly and think
Hmm.
about it. And so
Hmm.
it's always changing my communication to meet the needs of the person I'm working with
That's great.
versus forcing them into the way I communicate. And
Hmm.
I'm still learning and growing, and that's something I'm consciously aware of all the time, because I want to be the best I can be for each person who comes to see me. It's not about me, it's about them, which
Right.
means I'm the one who has to change to best meet their needs versus them fitting into my box and my criteria. And that's 23 years of experience. There's no way I could have done that when I was getting started. I don't know that I
Right.
even did that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure, at least I hope, that in 10 years, I'm 10 years better than I am now at
Yeah.
doing that.
Well, I'd be anxious. Two questions come to mind, then we'll get into rapid fire. Um, what do you think you've learned the most in this field over those 23 years? Is there something that sticks out, or is there a couple of things that really resonate with you?
Wow, that's a tough one. What have I learned the most? I think over time, I would say being more present with people rather than, and that goes back to the listening,
Yeah.
rather than formulating a new question or a new idea, or I know what I'm going to do with you, when they're
Yeah.
halfway through a sentence, really being present and getting to know that person versus having this preconceived notion of what's going to happen.
It's great.
Certainly learned that. And I think the other thing I would say is, I've always been pretty good at connecting with people, but in my opinion, that's the number one factor for success in this field. And it's something I consciously work to improve pretty consistently.
Hmm.
That comes from my upbringing. I grew up, but my dad's a Methodist minister and my mom was a teacher, and I was constantly on the church in front of people. I was even our church pianist for 5 years, and constantly meeting new people and that's just kind of the way I was raised. And I had no idea that that was preparing me for the field today, but it really helped me learn how to connect with a bunch of different type of people from a bunch of different
Yeah.
backgrounds, and to be open to being on stage and not having that fear of public speaking or anxiety or anything. I'm just so grateful for the opportunities that it brings me to help other people. And I think so a lot of it comes from that, but I think that's part of what also helped me recognize that importance of connection. And that's something I've preached for years to my students, through the university and other colleagues, and even the people that I hire within my practice. I have coaches who work for me in my practice, is that importance of connection. I can be the best in the world at what I do, but if you don't feel connected to me and you
Yeah.
don't feel like I can help you, I can't.
Yep.
So it's my job to work on being better at connecting with a lot of different people.
Well, and I think it's really impressive too, the servant mindset that you have and bring to the table with that, and just saying that you're willing to adapt and change and listen and, being present. I mean, hitting the pause button there. I think that's great advice for anybody listening, and even adding to the connection piece. I think that's huge. Just in general with who you're meeting, and not not having a preconceived notion of if they don't have 20,000 followers, I'm not going to have them on this show, or I'm not, there's just so much out there and so many valuable people that can add to that to continue to make me better and others around me better as a result of that. And that's where I want to finish before we go to rapid fire, because you mentioned just constantly growing and learning. Nicole, what are the ways that you do that? We obviously talk about, a book plug or two here. Other podcasts, those seem to be consistent ways, but I'd be interested in your field if those are some, and what else are there for you?
Sure. Yeah. I read voraciously. I read every chance I get. I mean, this is only a part of, you can see all of my books over here. I'm constantly reading. And I
Love
like
it.
tactile. I like writing all over my books and stuff. So I have a lot of, I'm old school that way. So I'm constantly reading, and not always books necessarily in the mental performance field. I'm reading business books. I'm reading self-help books. I have a bunch of different parenting books, like all kinds of stuff. Anything that I think might give me a little nugget of wisdom that I can then use with other people. I'm constantly reading that kind of stuff. And yep, podcasts, of course, I listen to podcasts. But the other ways are, I mentioned earlier, so I own my own company and I have coaches who work for me, and we do trainings where they've been a little inconsistent lately, but I would say probably once every 2 months, I will hire someone else to train us. And so we'll just get on a Zoom call, and that person will just talk about what they're doing with people lately and what do they see and what do they think. And we'll do a little research ahead of time and ask them questions and whatnot. But we're just kind of trying to learn from other people out there who are doing the same or similar things that we are, and how they're talking about the things that they're talking about. What are they seeing the most of? And then we'll kind of get together afterwards and figure out, like, what did you learn? What did you get from this? And then before the next one that we have, okay, what did you apply from the last person? What worked for you? So we're learning from each other through that process. So it's not just a sit down and listen to somebody for an hour or two, but we're actually talking about the application of that.
Mm-hmm.
The other things that I'm constantly doing is I'm writing. So even though I have one book, I actually have 3 others in the works right now too. And what I find is that through writing another book, I learn as well. So it's kind of forcing me to look for certain things to fill in my knowledge gaps. And, even though eventually the purpose is to, get this information out there to the world so other people can see it, I'm learning so much through that process. It's not just reading, but then I'm writing about it, which makes me synthesize it a little bit of a different way so that it makes sense in my world, and then I can apply it better. So
Right.
I have found that that's been really helpful for me, rather than just information going through my brain and moving on,
For sure. It's
Yeah.
probably an impossible question to ask. Like, it's when I ask somebody their favorite movie. When somebody reads a lot, do you have a favorite book or two, though?
Oh my gosh. It's like every time you ask me, it's probably like the last one that I read.
Right. I understand.
But I do get asked a lot for recommendations, and the ones it kind of depends on what you're looking for. But the ones I normally recommend, I love Atomic Habits by James
Oh,
Clear. That's
best
my favorite.
ever.
I think Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus's
Mhm.
Magus's
Yeah,
book,
man.
Peak
Yep.
Performance, is a really good one. That's one of the newer ones. I really like those that they're not just idea based, but they have some science behind them, yet they don't write it. They write it for
Okay.
the layperson to
Yeah.
understand
Yep.
rather than being all researchy. I do like the Performing Under Pressure book by Henry Weisinger and JP Paul Fry. Those are some of the ones that I'm going to recommend the most within the athletic world right now. Yeah, I have a lot.
Those are
I'm
good.
not going to recommend mine, but
For sure.
shameless
Definitely.
plug.
Well, hey, let's get to rapid fire. 3-pointers here. So I want to first start off, number one, with if people could take away one thing from this talk, what would you want them to take away and just really hold on to?
The one thing that means the most to them. Everyone's going to resonate with something differently. So go back and think about what's the one thing that stood out to you, and that's the thing that you needed to hear from today.
That's the most transparent and probably accurate answer I've received in 60 episodes. Number 2, if Nicole could have come over here today and been Kevin and asked Nicole a question, what question would have you asked that I did not ask?
Oh, I think you did a really good job. I would say that you had one question on there of what do most people come for? And I think that's an important one. What, in 23 years, are there things that you've seen people come in for more than any other?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important one to ask, because I think that that's going to help normalize for a lot of people what they might be feeling. And so I'll give you the quick answer, even though it's not rapid fire,
Oh,
right?
please go. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I'll tell you what, like I said, I've worked with thousands of athletes, all the way professional, some of the best in the world, making millions and millions and millions of dollars, and 10-year-olds, right? And everything in between. And two things people come for more than anything else, regardless of age, sex, sport, level of ability, none of that. And those two things, do you want to guess? See if you can guess.
Oh man, I've got no idea.
No?
You're just saying overall. Did we talk about it already?
Sort of.
Man, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where I don't know where it would go. I mean,
Okay.
I think it could go a number of ways.
Okay, so it's confidence. Everybody's struggling with confidence.
Yeah.
Even the guy who's making millions of
Right.
dollars, pitch by pitch, each pitch he makes $1 million bucks,
Mhm.
that guy struggles with confidence, just like the 10-year-old who struck out at the plate, right? Confidence and
Yeah.
anxiety. And it used to just be like nerves before a game, but now that's come into, it's that emotional that I was talking about earlier, that
Mhm.
emotional adaptability. So it's whether it's, being really nervous before the game, or not being able to let go of mistakes, beating yourself up, that emotion. So it's that emotional control. And
Yeah.
those two things, more than anything else, it's those two. And then there's a big gap between the other stuff that people come for. And those two things influence each other. So if you don't have very good control of your emotions, if you don't have good understanding and they're taking control over you, you're not feeling very confident, right? If you are feeling confident, you probably have better emotional control, emotional adaptability. So those two things are inversely related. And so building one will help influence the other, as I was talking about before. But anybody listening, if you're like, man, I don't always feel confident, and I don't even necessarily have a reason not to feel confident, but I don't, or I'm really, really nervous and I don't even know why. Like this game isn't even that important, or it's the
Mhm.
reverse, right? Either one of those two things, you're not alone. A
Yeah.
lot of people, a lot of athletes, almost every one of them that I've worked with over 23 years, those are the things that they're struggling with the most.
Yeah,
So I
that
guess I
makes
just want to
sense.
normalize that for people who might be listening.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think confidence came to mind, and I know we did touch on that earlier, so that definitely makes sense. Thank you for sharing. And finally, number 3, good stuff's the name of this. Tons of good stuff here today, but is there anything else that's on your mind, or something you can give us some good stuff in closing that you would feel appropriate?
Some good stuff in closing that I would feel appropriate. Man, I have so much good stuff. We could keep talking for hours. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm all about just helping people and helping people get to where they want to be and doing life a little bit better and enjoying life a
Yeah.
little bit more. And I think wherever any of your listeners can find their good stuff, go find it. I mean, don't judge yourself for what works for you. I'm a big believer in do what works. And
Yeah.
so find what works for you and do it. And who cares what it is? It's okay. You don't have to fit
Mhm.
into that box of this is the way we do things. You know
You're
what?
right.
You might be out here. And if it works, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I had a girl one time we were working on a word association where she would come up with this word that then would associate this feeling in her body that we had trained her for so that she could get into that space. And she used the word wombat because she said, where else in my life will I ever think or use the word wombat? And you know
Right.
what? She trained that association and she would say that word to herself before she would compete, and it worked. Like, no reason to judge that,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Use
Right.
the word wombat if it works.
Yeah.
So
That's
find what
good.
works and use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't judge
Good.
yourself for it.
Well, there you go. 3 for 3. I love it. Now this is me plugging you. So nothing shameless here. All right. But no, I want to make sure people know, let's go with a couple things. First and foremost, social media, where can they find you at?
Yeah. So my personal social media is Twitter and Instagram at HeadStrong Doc, DOC, like Dr. HeadStrong Doc. And then my company is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at HeadStrong Team. And then our website's headstrongconsulting.com. Our podcast is called Becoming Headstrong.
Yep.
And everywhere you find your podcasts, and those episodes are all less than 10 minutes. So it's just kind of these quick tips and tricks. And, if you find one that's not really relevant for you, the next one might be. So you've got a whole bunch of different stuff on there with 4 different hosts. So you'll hear from each of us 3 times a week. You'll hear like kind of a consistency. So you might hear from me every 4th episode, basically. So you hear different voices of, people giving you some advice and different things, and you might resonate with one person more than another. What else do we have? That's probably it, right?
Well, what about book and
Yeah.
any insight to when these other ones are going to be done?
Oh gosh, right. Yeah. The problem that I have is that I'll get really into one for a bit, and then I'll read another book. I'm like, oh, that works on this one. I'll get really into this one
100%.
for a bit. But one of them, I do have a co-author. We're working on it together, and we're working pretty consistently. And that one's actually this resiliency piece. So we are turning my resiliency talk that I've been doing with the government with these 8 protective factors into a book. And we're not sure if it's going to be a workbook yet or just an informational type of book, but we did just finish the first rough draft. So I would guess, we get together pretty consistently and write. I would guess in the next 6 months, that would probably be an accurate time frame for when that one will be released. The other 2, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Well, we look forward to them. I'm so fortunate, Nicole, that we connected in Florida. That was a great experience for me. I know for a fact I was the dumbest guy in the room, but I learned so much and made some good connections. Man, I love what you're doing, Nicole. You're doing so many good things. You're impacting so many people. Like I alluded to earlier, I love your approach, your mindset with all this. And I'm just really appreciative that you took some time out of your schedule to join us today. And I know that you've added a ton of value here. It'll be talked about at the Bille household at the table with a couple, 12 and 14-year-old for sure. So thanks so much for everything and just being here today.
Yeah, Kevin, I really appreciate you having me on. Like I said before, I just want to share this information and help as many people as I can. And so I appreciate the opportunity to reach more people with the stuff that I know that works.
Well, thanks again. And hey, for anybody that you know all the places now to follow Nicole, I know the podcast is really good. I would suggest them. I've listened to a couple that I know have helped me. And as you know, always you can reach out to me at goodstuffkevin@gmail.com. Love hearing about you. Love sharing your thoughts if they come to Nicole, and just staying in touch. So thanks again for listening. We appreciate it. Until next time, good stuff.
Thanks, everybody.